Hi, Nick here from GordAlex Digital Media, GDM. Just saying hello to you, and very briefly going to tell you what we're going to talk about today. Got a few things we're going to cover off. Firstly, I'm going to reintroduce ourselves properly so you know a bit about our background. After the intro to myself and to the company, I'll tell you a bit about how we've ended up in this really strange space, which hopefully you'll find interesting. And then later on in the live in particular, we're going to get into GDPR and some of the security bits that are relevant to you guys who've got an interest in social and digital media. So to start off with then, me. Along with some of my colleagues, I'm ex-military, done a whole bunch of things that were quite entertaining, but probably best known for work I did in the intelligence community. That was a long time ago, and managed to get myself injured when I was serving with the army. After that, traveled around the world, worked in various places. There's been a lot of stuff I've done, seen and worked with. We then moved into the corporate world, and things came full circle and I got back into the technology world. Now that technology world, because I was working for some of the blue chip companies that were in the defense and security arena, that brought me into contact with security aspects. It's not a proper live if we don't have a phone going off. And from there, I got deeper into what you can do with technology. I'll say up front, I'm not a technologist, but I know some very clever people who are. So how did I get into this? Well, after running my own company with some partners for 10 years, which I sold out of in 2016. I then ended up not quite on the streets. We did okay, but I had to move on. And went through a time where I was just doing basic consultancy. And then on the back of that, I started GordAlex, which is our core company. And from that core company, we have grown GordAlex Digital Media. Now, GordAlex Digital Media is the bit I'm going to tell you the slightly odd story of how we got into it. So this is the true version. GDM came into existence with one of the guys who's here helping us with the filming, Adam, and myself, because we've been doing some advisory stuff around resilience, around appropriateness of people's social and digital media environment and the security aspects of it. And what actually happened was one of the managing directors, who was a client, looked at me one day and said, "Can you help me to make some money out of this?" I looked at him a bit strange. I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, we've spent all this money with you, making sure that our websites are good, our public-facing presentation is good and it's secure and we're not going to be vulnerable, we're not doing things we shouldn't be doing. But can you help me to make some money?" And so I asked a question that was pretty obvious and which you're probably thinking of, which was, why have you got it if you're not making money out of it? That's the whole purpose of it. And it became really clear there was a niche for us to move into, which was a lot of companies have got a social and digital presence, but don't really understand why they've got it. Somebody told them to. The marketing manager gave them some idea that they should have a Facebook page. And they're not really understanding what's involved in it. So from there, partly from Adam's skills, partly from some of the people I knew, and partly from some of the training that we've had with some of the biggest names in the business, and I will name check Ty Lopez, who's been invaluable to us. We got into the social media marketing and how to actually take value from it into our client base. Now, this was particularly interesting, it got really exciting, and it's an ongoing journey that we're on now. But there are a lot of companies that can do that, a lot of companies that claim they can do that. The thing that differentiates us and the thing that makes GordAlex Digital Media, GDM, what it is today, is that we kind of came full circle. In that, if you think of it, that we started from security, we went round into social media and digital media. And we came back to security. And one of the drivers for that is something we're going to be talking about a lot later on, which is the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation that's coming out in Europe fairly shortly. So going back a step before we get into the GDPR and so forth, what is it that we do that's different? What do you get out of knowing what we know? Well, what we want to do is give you some information today about how you can think about not just making money out of your social media, but doing it in a way that is going to be robust and safe and secure going forward. Now, I'm sure a lot of you know about the basics of funnels and the different media channels. Different people use different words. I like the word channels. And so just to go back over that, I think it'd be important to lay the ground rules, because within what we're going to be talking about later on, you need to understand the subtle differences between all the different ways you can engage with people. So if we go right back to the basics, the first thing you've got is your website. Some people agree, some people disagree, but generally we find if you haven't got a robust, decent website that engages people, you're going to get nowhere. From there, the next most obvious place to go is to a Facebook page. We're all familiar with Facebook and social media in general, but what I would say to you is pretty much forget everything that your teenage daughter or niece has told you. This is something different. It's all about understanding what the data is. Now, that's got a very bad reputation in the last few weeks. And again, we'll cover that off a bit later, but just take it on faith. There are legal and legitimate things you can do to get value to your business. Now, coming down the line, you've got Instagram, you've got YouTube, and the reason I draw it out this way is that Facebook is very much about the person, about the data, about the information you're putting out there. Instagram is a visual platform. It's about video, it's about getting stories out, it's about getting clips. YouTube is not just about longer videos and bigger videos, and this video will be up on YouTube probably when you watch it. YouTube is the second largest search engine currently on the internet. Don't miss out on the power of that. The final one really, and there are others, there's Snapchat, and we won't cover that in so much detail today. Then you've got finally Twitter. Now, each of these communicates with the audience, communicates with the public in different ways. And what I'll try and relate is how these different channels relate to the GDPR, and in particular, the regulations and the security aspects of what they are in a moment. We're going to switch over cameras in a minute, so you'll see a break, not on the live, I'm staying with you. But just to very quickly talk through these. The website should be more than just a brochure. A lot of people's it is only a brochure, but even if it is only a brochure, there are things that you can do to make it good. The key point is that is where you want to get people to opt in to what you're telling them. It doesn't matter whether you're a business, a store retailer, a charity, whatever. That is going to be the hub, and these are going to be the spokes that are going to come off it. And the aim is to get people to your website to join in with you from there. Facebook. It's an opportunity to tell your story, but there are certain limitations and certain rules, and that is getting tighter. As we covered, Instagram and YouTube, video, pictures. You can use static pictures, but it's estimated by 2020 there's going to be over 90% of content consumed is going to be video, which is what you're watching now. So we're now going to switch over in the next minute to the next portion of it, which is what you can do about securing and protecting and what your obligations are. So GDPR is a regulation, not a directive, that has come out of Europe. A lot of the world that might, I hope, be watching this are going to be probably thinking, well, it's got nothing to do with me. That is where you are wrong. If you have got the possibility to have any client who is an EU citizen, including the UK, forget Brexit and all that stuff, this will affect you. It's not optional, it's not something you can kind of ignore. Now, there are ways to mitigate that, there are ways to handle it, but that's what I'm going to talk about next. GDPR. It's got a lot of people scared, and in simple numbers, the headline that probably most people will know if they know anything about it at all is 20 million euros fine and potentially 4% of your global turnover. 4%. Now that number is aimed at some very big companies. £1 million fines are aimed at very big companies, but it will hurt, it will cause damage. The key point about that is that it is not the number, it's not what they can do to you. It is a show of intent that this is going to be taken seriously, so you can't ignore it. Now, just going back a stage, what is it all about and why is it there? And this is really important to understand why everybody who watches this will be affected by it. Whether you're from the UK, whether you're from Sweden, whether you're from France, whether you're from the Philippines, whether you're from the United States, Canada, Venezuela, it doesn't matter. If you do business, and it doesn't have to be e-com or online business, if you do business at all that touches a European citizen, any data that you collect on that person through the legitimate side of your business is covered by the General Data Protection Regulation. Now, GDPR was written for one very specific reason, and that is to protect the individual's rights and freedoms to privacy. Because of that, what it all hinges on is a thing called PII, which is personal identifiable information. Those of you who haven't seen me present before, you're probably getting the idea that I can't write and talk at the same time. Now, this term is the core of the whole thing because it means that the regulation, or in simple speak, the law that has come out of the EU affects the individual, not the entity, not where its data is held, not where data is transacted, not where data is processed. It's all about the individual. So if the individual in any way has something that can identify them, so an email address, a phone number, and a physical address, and even going into some more advanced data technologies, Internet of Things, big data, the fusion of it and how that can identify people, your telephony, now your biometrics, even as much detail as DNA is talked about and biometric data is talked about in the regulation. We're not going to get into the detail, so don't worry about that. What we are going to talk about though is if you think about how in social and digital marketing, if you engage with someone, you have crossed that boundary, that threshold, and you have to adhere to these regulations. Now, in simple terms, some people watching this will probably be saying, well, that's too scary, I don't want to be involved. And actually, that's fair, and that's a position that you can take. But just think about the markets that you would be excluded from. It is entirely possible to build your marketing campaign, your marketing structures around the idea of, I live in the US, for example, and I am going to only market and sell to North America. And I'm going to exclude anything to do with that nasty business around Europe and GDPR. You can do that. But if you are not following the rules and there is a mistake, if there is one person that sneaks through the boundaries or even lies to you about where they're coming from, and you haven't got the correct checks and balances and processes in place, you are liable. No matter how crazy that may sound, that is where you're going to be. So think very carefully about your choices if you want to go down that road, when in actual fact being compliant and seeing the processes that you should be putting in place could be considered best practice. And I don't just mean best practice for Europe, best practice against this thing. It is pretty certain that this legislation, which comes in May 25th this year, 2018, I'll put that up there so you remember. On that date, this becomes law. Other regimes around the world, other regulators will be looking at this. And whilst they may not copy it, I will guarantee you that over a period of time, this will be assessed against what is deemed best practice. And bits of it, and potentially large chunks of it, may end up in your area. So if you're ahead of the game, it's going to save you a whole world of pain, and it's going to give you a commercial advantage. On the other hand, if you just do it as good practice, how good does that make you look to your clients? How good does that make you look when you're selling yourself and putting yourself out there? So what is it that GDPR is all about? Well, there are a core set of interest areas, and there are some things that it isn't. The biggest area that it's going to hit, that the current social and digital space occupies at the moment, is around a lot of email list and a lot of bot communication and marketing data. It doesn't mean to say that you can't do it, it just means that you have to do it in a particular way. And I'll give you a specific that you can take action on now. Just look at how you get permission. And permission is something that is key to this regulation, particularly around PII. So you want to market to me, you find my email address. Are you allowed to contact me? Answer, no. Why? Because I haven't given you permission to. If, on the other hand, you put out this wonderful video about GDPR and its beautiful environment, and you tell me a really good story and something that interests me, and I come to you because you're giving me value in the content you're giving, and I choose to go down the rabbit hole of opting in, and it is done in a particular way, explicitly, then I choose to give you permission to market to me, and I let you communicate. That means that some of the old techniques are still valid, but you've got to look at how you are doing it. Here's one of the big gotchas, one of the big bear traps in the whole game. If you aren't actually 100% sure that you've got explicit permission to market or to communicate with somebody for a particular purpose, you need to seriously look at deleting or getting rid of that contact, that information. Because part of the whole regulation is about allowing the individual the right to privacy, the individual right to be forgotten, as the term is. Some organisations, and I'm not going to get into the detail here and now about what's right, what's wrong, but some organisations are looking at actually completely destroying their databases prior to this date and then restarting. For some cases, that might be right. Certainly it could be considered a bit extreme for a lot of cases. However, if you aren't confident of how you've gone about collecting your data and how you've gone about collecting your lists and your contacts and your potential clients, you want to give it a very serious thought. Now, what I'd say is we're going to be wrapping up very soon here. mainly because this was just a quick taster, and we'll be putting out some more content over the next few days and weeks, not just during the run up to here but afterwards. But if you want to know more, go to our sites, our websites. You'll see the details below, both on the live and at GordAlexDigitalMedia.com. Fairly easy to find. And from that, you'll be able to follow up, get more content, and look at some of the options about how we may be able to give you more information, or potentially we could help you. But I hope you found this of interest. I hope you found this of value, and thank you for your time and for sitting in and watching with us. And if you've got any questions, put them in the notes below, send us messages, send us emails, and unless you give us permission, we won't market to you.